This is Thoughts Like Rabbits, and I'm going to be discussing the membrane as an irken theory. Professor Membrane, the father and Dib and Gaz membrane, or if my theory is correct, Gaz and Dib brain. Now I'm going to start off with human and irken biology comparison. We'll start off with the human. Humans, in the cartoon, they have these kind of square ears, and their eyes only go about this big. And most of them tend to have quite distorted heads, but also fairly round. But there are some children who look like they have these weird rectangle heads, and I don't know how that happened exactly, other than they have these weird squarish rectangular heads. How are those kids alive? Then they have natural pupils and eye whites. They also have what you would expect in a human: guts. A whole lot of guts. Intestines, spleen, lungs, and a quite visible nose. Irkens. They have no visible ears. They don't have much of a visible nose either. It's likely they actually smell with their antennae. And they have these huge eyes that are like twice the size of a human's in the cartoon. But when squinting, they can make it look kind of like the size of a human's. The irkens also have green skin. Their guts consist of one thing that, if you kind of think about it, actually is a lot more things than the irkens claim it is. It's big spooge. In their language, it probably means one organ, and they claim it does everything. But their packs connect to it. And they have a little nerve control center in that little area that when their pack connects to it, it can control them if necessary. But because of how dependent on the pack they are, they can die without it. Humans, on the other hand, don't need packs, for obvious reasons. Intellect. Now, the humans in the show aren't all that bright, probably because it's mostly from Zim's point of view, but it's just as likely that everyone's minds are overly polluted with toxic gas and food and whatnot, that they can't think straight. Most of them, at least. With the membrane family, what you see is the children are highly intelligent, so is their dad. His children look mostly human, and can pull them off to such an extent that you wouldn't suspect anything if you took one look at them. You just think they're weird. Well, when it comes to the biology, because irkens don't have this thing right here, it's quite, they have to shout quite a bit of the words so they can be heard, which is why I think Zim shouts a lot. And membrane. The history of Earth. It's likely that on that Earth there was a huge apocalyptic nightmare that happened, like an A-bomb going off or something, and everyone's just trying to rebuild. Yeah, it likely was not a pretty sight, and everyone's just trying to survive for the most part, which is why most of the food is disgusting and everything, highly processed to such an extent it doesn't look like food anymore. With Professor Membrane, when it comes to his history, the only thing you ever really get of his past is that he doesn't like Santa. And if he's an irken, it would make total sense to why being a little irken hiding on Earth. It's like, because of how small he was in that scene, if he was an irken, he would have been a child. Unlike Zim, who was a full-grown adult irken. Probably early adult. Whereas Membrane, because of his height and the way he was talking in that scene, it was probably no more than maybe 10 years, about 10, 20 years old in irken years. He's a highly intellectual man who never shows his face despite being super famous. How his irken's showing? Earlier I made comparisons between humans and irkens. He's super intelligent, so he hadn't been eating much of the polluted stuff, and he likely grew his own food half the time. When you look at him from certain angles, especially from the top, irkens are bald, for the most part, naturally bald. But if Membrane is trying to hide a pair of antennae, it would make total sense that he would hide it under a large wig, even if it's only one antennae. You look at him from the top, and what you see is he doesn't have any ears. You compare him to the other scientists who tried doing hiding their faces like him, and what you see is their ears poking out from from in front of the strap of their goggles. Membrane, he wears goggles and these sort of mechanical straps, but if you look, they're not big enough to properly cover his ears. But you notice he doesn't have ears. Doesn't matter what angle you look at him from, he doesn't have ears. When you look at his eyes, they're for the most part human size. They don't seem to change his size until he's like surprised, where you're definitely going to open your eyes wide, and it literally doubles in size to that of an irken. And the tallest tend to keep their eyes fairly level whenever they're not surprised or they're bored or just fascinated or whatever. They tend to keep their eyes level. So it makes sense that Membrane would probably kind of pick up that habit a little bit, especially if he's wearing kind of small goggles. In the movie, it actually shows you that he has no nose. He's looking up at Dib, and you can clearly see the collar of his coat flying around like this, and you can see down it that he has no nose. He doesn't even have a bridge of a nose. And it doesn't tip Dib off. As I stated, that irkens are loud, because they can't hear very well. Membrane is somewhat constantly shouting, like an irken, emphasizing some things, like he learned how to speak from his pack, like Zim. But unlike Zim, he tended to drop most of the insults. One thing about irkens is, when they're born, they are automatically assigned a job. They are programmed with a pack, and automatically assigned a job. It's likely Membrane, if he is an irken, was chosen to be a scientist from birth. And because of the things he tends to build, it's likely he'd become a fugitive after finding something out that he wasn't supposed to. Or building something he wasn't supposed to. Irken's skin is green. And if he wanted to blend in with the humans, but not having the proper the proper disguise technology with him, which was probably only given to very specific individuals, like invaders. He likely took a little bit of human DNA and mixed it with his own to gain proper human pigments. And likely also gave himself hair. Either real hair or a wig. Now, considering in the movie he had hair, so it's just likely that it's natural hair. In the episode where Dib was getting stuck in a nightmare realm, the one thing to note is that when Dib saw the the monster version of his dad, what he saw was 3 fingers, and his collar was stitched to his face. Still no ears. And all of that came from Dib's subconscious mind. So he probably does know his dad as an irken. He just doesn't remember. Subconsciously, he knows, but he doesn't ask, nor does it make any connections, because his mind's been erased enough times that he's pretty convinced his dad is normal. Another thing about irkens is the fact that they have 3 fingers. Some people deliberately, when they draw pictures, add a finger. With Membrane, it's most likely that he added a fake finger. Added a fake finger to each hand, and then wore gloves over it so nobody would be able to tell. It's also highly likely that Membrane still thinks like his younger self, considering he freaks out emotionally, like a child. Yeah, it's also likely he's the only true Irken parent. You might ask, if he's an Irken, where is his pack? If he can't die, if he can die without it, why isn't he dead yet? Simple. He is a scientist. Means he likely figured out how to remove it without killing himself. Within 100 years, within 100, maybe 200 years. I don't know how long Irken's been kind of cloning or just using machines to incubate the babies. He's the only true Irken parent. He's the only one who actually raises his children. And because he was partly raised on... and likely because he was slightly raised on Irk, he does have some of those bad Irken qualities of being raised straight from... being straight out of birth. And another thing about Irkens is they have this knack for wanting to take over other planets. It's kind of built into their genetic code. Membrane is kind of already taken over Earth, but Zim doesn't know it. He's super famous and everyone calls on him for half of everything. But he doesn't tell his tallest because he doesn't want them knowing that he's there. How it shows in his children. Gaz, it's not as obvious. But there are some points where she actually opens her eye to such a point that you can tell that she's part Irken. Her high intellect, which her father gave to her. Maybe a few other things. With Dib, he gives a lot more clues. For instance, and in the movie, Membrane was shown to have bones in his hair. But considering it was only one single strand of bones, it would make sense that it's only one antennae. This is another thing about the Irkens. They have small bones in their antennae. With Dib, his starts in the episode where Zim goes into Dib to get him to destroy his own evidence. He found his arm control nerves. Humans do not have arm control nerves in their belly. Irkens, on the other hand, kind of do. So that's likely something Dib got from the Irken half. And Dib is even slightly confused by this. Dib also has humongous eyes. Tiny body and a huge head. Which is normal for an Irken. Not so normal for a human. And when you look at their baby pictures, you compare them to the size of the blocks compared to the size of the blocks of the baby in the episode full of the fake alien babies that were stuck on Earth. Gaz and Dib were about the same size, and they were smaller than those babies. On the other hand, they were perfect size for Irkens, showing that they grow up in test tubes. Yeah, some people suspect that Dib and Gaz's mom was more of a scientist that worked with Membrane. It would make twice as much sense that he would have chosen someone extremely close to him, like a best friend, who was a girl, to get Gaz and Dib. Gaz would be the most likely to look like her mom. He designs Dib to look more like what he wanted to look like as a human, and it worked. Irkens also tend to handle damage to their person a lot more easily than a human, having probably a slightly thicker skeleton due to their heavy gravity world. Why is their show in the first place? That and both Gaz and Dib had shown to be stronger than the average children that were slightly taller than them, which is probably something Membrane made sure of. Then a lot of Membrane stuff. In the very first episode, what you find out is that Dib is able to pick up on radio frequencies and whatnot from Irk. His dad but he had to borrow it from his dad, who likely used it on a more regular basis to communicate. More like listen in, because it was only a listening device. It's likely Membrane still kind of missed home a little bit. There's also the fact that he's able to contact Zim's, but it also makes sense that if he tells his son is going to blurt it out to the world. If he gets his secret identity blown, Zim, even more so with Zim around, because Zim is most likely to tell the tallest that he found Membrane. So he pretends that aliens don't exist and does everything in his power to keep his son away from the truth. It's kind of sad, but it makes total sense. An Irken making half-human Irkens, that would probably be considered either sacrilege or worthy of death. Something that would cause death for him and his family. On the other hand, convincing Zim that he's not an Irken, and instead just a mad scientist, it makes Zim is also clearly fooled, but Membrane is still willing to talk to him because, well, he's another Irken. It's someone he can talk to that is not from Earth. Yeah, another sign that Membrane has not grown up is the fact that he's kind of obsessed with video games. It's the easiest way to bond with his kids. Well, Gaz anyway. That and Membrane likes to build these little puppets and whatnot. It's just it's funny. And he accuses Dib of being insane. He knows his son is not insane. He just wants him to stop going down that path, so that it'll be easier to keep him alive. It's likely that Membrane did get married, but his wife likely died before the children were done incubating. Why he's a little protective of them sometimes. But he's also an Irken. His parenting instincts are kind of in conflict. Another thing is, Irkens tend to have these naturally square teeth, which I think are supposed to be nice and sharp, and more shark-like or something, in a more realistic way, but because it's a cartoon, you can't really tell what kind of teeth they actually have. All the other children, it tends to be short. Zim, it tends to be a little longer. So, also on Dib and Gaz. Membrane, you can't see it. Because he constantly and because he always has a collar in the way. And it is specifically designed to hide everything. And it's something he grew up with. If you look at the Irken scientists, what you get to see is that they wear these little red coats with their collars that hide everything. They even wear goggles. So it wouldn't be unusual if Membrane is a little Irken scientist for him to adopt a more human-like version of that. But at home, he also doesn't wear pants. And if you look at the little Irken scientists on the battleship, when they're floating around, they're not wearing pants. At all. You can't see the little pants sleeves. They don't even wear shoes. Membrane, he probably would give himself away if he took his boots off. Taking his pants off, on the other hand, that's not an issue. Because he looks like he has human legs. But then you look at Zim, he doesn't seem to have any issues with climbing. Then, throughout the show, you see the humans kind of struggle to climb things. Neither does Gaz or Dib. Membrane, on the other hand, you never really get to see climb, but you can definitely see through Gaz and Dib. That is more or less art and a little bit of the irken. Another thing about about humans and irkens, is a lot of people get this one tiny little detail wrong. They think that being aggressive is perfectly normal for female irkens. Number one, that was the only female irken you came across. She was only aggressive because she was really angry at Zim. Zim was confused. He wasn't sure if that... and because she was disguised as a human, he thought that was normal for a human. As in, it's not normal for irkens or humans for the females to be extremely aggressive. She was giving way too many mixed signals, which is why he was confused, and why he hated the idea of being a love pig. And once she explained herself, he was like, so that explains the attitude. I don't like you either! So irkens are not always aggressive. They're as aggressive as a human. So I think that's all I really have to say. Comment. Point out little things I missed. And you can comment about that too. Bye!